Let's talk about digital identity, the podcast connecting identity and business. I am your host, Oscar Santolaya. Hello and thanks for joining. Today we are going to hear about the importance of women in identity. And for that, I would like to introduce Emma Lindley. She is an advisor on digital identity and co-founder of Women in Identity, a not-for-profit organization focused on developing diversity in the identity industry. Over a career of 16 years in identity, Emma has held various roles, most recently as head of identity and risk at Visa, previous board-level roles at Confirm, Innovate Identity, and the Open Identity Exchange, and was instrumental in the commercial development of GB Group's position in the identity market back in 2003. She has been recognized in the No Identity Top 100 Leaders in Identity in 2017, 18, and 19, the Innovate Finance Power List for Women 2016 and 17, and was voted CEO of the Year at the No Identity Awards. She has an MBA from Manchester Business School and completed her thesis in Competitive Strategy in the Identity Market. Hello, Emma.
Hi, Oscar.
It's very nice talking with you, Emma, and I really want to hear more about women identity and what you have been doing. And so let's start. Let's talk about digital identity.
For sure.
So please tell me a bit about your journey, how you entered to this world of digital identity.
Sure. So, I started in the identity industry back in 2003. And it's interesting, actually. I kind of didn't intentionally move into this industry. I was working at a company based in the UK, and we had some data about kind of UK citizens, things like the electoral roll and some telephone records. Mm-hmm. And the CEO at the time had quite a lot of kind of, foresight into the future. And he said, I think this problem with kind of online identity it's going to become a thing. And he asked a small team of us to get together. There was 6 of us at the time asked to get together and develop a product proposition around using some of the data that we had about UK people to help with this kind of problem that he foresaw in the future around identity and online identity. And the product that we put together replicated the process that banks have to go through, the KYC, Know Your Customer process that banks had to go through at the time to check people's identities. And the way that the banks in the UK did that at the time was looking at, paper-based processes, looking at passports, looking at driving licenses. Often people had to go into a branch to do that process. That was more often than not. There were some electronic databases around at the time, but not many. And so we set about building a process that directly replicated the manual processes that the banks had to do. The first product, minimum viable product that we put together was on a CD-ROM. Which I think always kind of makes people laugh now. And then we took that proposition out to a few companies and we got some really good feedback. And then we did a kind of joint venture with British Telecom to put that into a web services environment. So we effectively kind of built the product and BT did all of the secure hosting for us. But that meant that, we could serve the service 24/7. And it meant that all the banks could use an API, use web services, and use the service 24/7. It was a real game changer for the industry in the UK. And we sold it to all the banks and a whole bunch of other companies, telecoms companies, online gambling companies in 2005 when the gambling market in the UK regulated. And yeah, that's how I kind of got into the industry. So it wasn't intentional, but it certainly has kept me interested over this time. There's been a huge amount of change. And I've done a whole variety of kind of roles since then. And one of those roles was developing that kind of electronic identification service out globally. I've run my own consulting firm, and most recently I was head of identity and risk at Visa. So yeah, it's certainly kept me interested. And over time, I think, people, particularly my family, have become more familiar with what I do, and I think that's, an unfortunate thing because, we have a lot more stuff in the press about people's identities being stolen. We obviously have a lot more data breaches, which have been in the press, but it does now mean that my family now know what I do. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, excellent. So you were actually creating one of the earliest identity products for the UK. So that's excellent. So what was your original role in this original position you entered into this company?
Yeah, so I started out life as more kind of like business development. So understanding market needs and then helping feedback into the product proposition and then going out and getting kind of early stage feedback from organizations. I started out life in kind of business development, sales, and then I've moved in through a number of different roles. I've run product teams, I've run professional services implementation teams. So it's interesting because I haven't necessarily come from a kind of technical background.
Right.
And I think that's one of the beauty about the identity industry, even though, a lot of the things, the way that we look at solving kind of digital identity is using technology, it's very much a problem that I think non-technical and technical people have a very valid voice in. And I think it's important for us to have non-technical people in the area of identity because it involves humans. And, that's an incredibly diverse topic. Humans are, we're not a piece of technology. And so I think it's important to have non-technical and technical people working in the field. So I think it's a great and interesting field and something that, kind of anybody can join.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't agree more. We need people from all backgrounds, and you are a great example of that. And today, from your perspective, from the experience that you have been having in identity already for 16 years, correct? And could you tell me, what do you think, on your opinion, what are the main challenges today in digital identity?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a number of challenges around, and I'll try and kind of cut it down. For the identity industry, I think there are a number of challenges, but I also think just for the general kind of population, if we, focus on, identity around people rather than, IoT devices for the moment,
right.
I think there are kind of three things from a user perspective. One of those is we have, and this is well documented, 1.1 billion people that are unable to cannot be identified because they don't have the basic feeder documents to get even, have a legal identity. And it's interesting because we hook a lot of the identification processes around, government issued documents, and not necessarily everybody has that kind of documentation. There's even segments of the UK population that don't have passports and don't have driving licenses. And often they are the most disadvantaged people.
Sure.
So I'll use a UK example. A passport in the UK costs £70 to apply for. If you're going to get a passport and pay the £70, that probably means that you're thinking about travelling abroad. If you don't have a lot of money, you probably haven't got the £70, and you probably haven't, got the money to go abroad. And then the other thing, so people then kind of, perhaps who have less money, don't tend to get passports. And then if we think about the other document that we use in the UK, that's the driving licence. Again, the process for that, you don't have to pay for a driving license, but you need to be thinking about, well, I might be getting driving lessons to learn to drive. Those cost a lot of money. And then you might be thinking, well, I need to buy a car. And again, those things cost money. And I think if people don't have money, and I have seen this in a number of projects that I've run in areas of the UK where there is more poverty, people don't have passports and driving licenses. And so what we find is that people that are already disadvantaged are then unable to get perhaps bank accounts. They're unable to get into the financial services products. They're unable to make the savings. They're unable to move into the digital world. And we've got all these, the people that, people talk about, in countries like Africa who don't have a lot of these feeder documents, but it's not just a third world problem. It's also a first world problem. So I think that's one of the key issues for people. I think the other thing that we have around digital identity and, authentication and all that type of thing, and, keeping people data safe online, is it's getting so much more complex, and people, I don't think, really understand how to keep their data safe. They don't know how to, passwords are fraught with problems. Trying to remember all of people trying to remember their passwords is really challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's also a real challenge. It's getting more complex. The fraudsters are getting more sophisticated, and I think that's a challenge for people. And I think the other thing around digital identity is people just understanding what it is, and I think, there are countries, particularly in the Scandies, where they've done particularly well around digital identity, the bank ID. In Finland, obviously, they've had TUPAS, and I know that that's changing in September.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, there are some examples where we can see that the kind of digital identity infrastructure has done well and has, Estonia, for example. But in a lot of countries, I don't think people understand what it is, And so, the UK, for example, it's incredibly fragmented. We've got lots of different types of solutions. The government have had a GovUK Verify, but that hasn't had the uptake that was needed. There are some private sector solutions, but the uptake, again, is, in the millions, not in the tens of millions.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really challenging for people to understand what a digital identity is. A lot of people think, well, that's my Facebook login, and it's not. And so I think that kind of leaves us with issues. And I think from an industry perspective, we have some challenges as well. I think one of the main challenges we have is interoperability. Now, in Europe, we've got this framework, which is EIDAS, but that's taken a long time for people to kind of get into that framework. And then we don't have interoperability across other markets. You don't have interoperability between, Canada and Australia, for example. So I think that's one of the challenges. And we, as an industry, have so many different solutions. We've got, and everyone's kind of commercially competing. And I don't think there's enough collaboration. And I think that the other thing, and this kind of ties back with what I was saying about people, I think as an industry, we tend to be too technically focused. And I'm making a bit of a generalizing, sweeping statement there, but I tend to see that there's not enough user experience testing done for users, and that helping people understand like how they keep things secure and what a digital identity is and how they can use it and what it means and all of those types of things. I think that's a challenge for us as an industry, because we tend to come at solutions perhaps from our own viewpoint. And if we are, perhaps all quite technically savvy, all that type of thing, then we'll come at things with that viewpoint. And not everybody, is particularly technically savvy. I've sat in on a lot of user testing, and, people don't know how to use things like FaceTime. And so I think we're kind of, when we start talking about, cryptographic keys and, all of this type of stuff, as an industry, we need to be making things more simple for people to understand, and we need to be doing user testing, and we need to be iterating our solutions around the user. So those are the biggest challenges I think that are in identity today. So there's quite a lot, but I think that some of those are quite interlinked.
Oh yeah, definitely. you have mentioned quite a few, and it's true. It feels like digital identity is not so connected to people. One of the reasons you mentioned is expensive, right? Billion of people who don't have at all, and also the ones who might be closer find it difficult because it's very technical. So we have many challenges to solve.
Many challenges.
Exactly, the ones who like you and me who are working in this industry. And
exactly.
So now let's go to what I'd like to discuss more detail with you. This project, very interesting project, Women in Identity. Start telling us a bit how it started, what the history.
Sure. So around 2 years ago, there was a few of us who'd been in the industry for quite a long time. And we kind of ended up having a conversation with each other around 2 years ago. And we were all kind of thinking the same thing. We were like, hey, there's lots of women in groups, women in tech groups, women in fintech groups, in other industries. We don't have one in our industry. And we were kind of discussing and saying, do we think that this is even a thing? Do we think people would be interested? And so we decided to test it out. And 2 years ago, the Identiverse conference said, well, okay, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll give you a room at our conference, and over the lunchtime, we'll send some lunch to that room. We'll advertise that you're going to have a kind of women in identity meetup, and just see how it goes. So there was a few of us there, and we put together a kind of slide deck, and we were like, this is kind of what we're thinking about a women in identity group might be. And we were at the lunch, and we were thinking, well, only 10 people might turn up, and that kind of might be it. But we were really, really pleasantly surprised. There was standing room only. There wasn't even enough seats for people to sit down. We ran out of lunch because there wasn't enough food for people. And, it was just amazing to see the turnout at the conference. And so we were really encouraged by that. And we thought, well, hey, this kind of feels like it, it's a thing. And so what we decided to do was just to test the proposition. And over the sort of last 2 years, we've been running meetups globally in kind of various different countries just to get feedback from different people and from industry to understand what a women in identity group might be. And over that time, we've just taken lots of feedback from people, but we've also looked at research that's coming out of places like MIT around some of the issues around technology and the lack of diversity in technology. And I think what that's led us to really is the group is called, Women in Identity. And it is a not-for-profit organisation, membership organisation that we have formed. But it's not just about women. It is absolutely about all diversity in our industry and ensuring that, and we are an industry-facing organisation, we're shining a light on the industry, and we're saying to the industry, we need to make sure that we have diverse teams thinking about these solutions, these identity solutions, building these solutions, testing these solutions. Because if we don't have that kind of level of diversity, and I was talking earlier on about technical and non-technical, that's just one element of diversity, people from different backgrounds, gender diversity, racial diversity, sexual orientation in terms of diversity. It's really, really important that we have that kind of diversity, because what we have started to see is evidence of bias being developed into the technologies that sit in the identity industry. So there's actually a piece of research done by a lady called Joy Boulin-Winnie. She's from MIT, and she found that when they looked at just a number of facial recognition systems, but the error rate for a white male face was below 1%. Mm-hmm. And when it got to a female face, that increased to around 20%. And when it got to a female face of color, that error rate went to around 37%. Wow. So if we think about the types of technologies, so I usually give this example, if you think about the types of technologies that the banks are starting to use now, where, you can use facial recognition and to access services, perhaps, taking a picture of your identity card or your driving license or your passport, and then using facial recognition. If you're a white male, you're more likely to get access to that service than if you're a female face of color, by an enormous kind of error rate. And so what we're starting to do, inadvertently, I think nobody's saying that this is happening deliberately, but inadvertently as an industry, we're starting to take some of the biases that we have in the real world and starting to develop those into the systems in the virtual world. And that means that we're actually going to end up with systems that are less inclusive, not more inclusive. And when I go back to one of the biggest problems that we've got in identity is, these people, these 1.1 billion people that don't have an identity, and that's because they don't have the kind of basic documents. But if you think about people that, we talked about diversity, people might not be particularly technologically savvy. Mm-hmm. We're then saying, well, actually, we're also potentially going to have systems that are going to further exclude people. So as an industry, if our aim is to take everybody into the digital world and be able to have a digital identity and be able to get access to services and healthcare and all of education and all these amazing things that people can get access to with a digital identity, we have to be thinking about bias within our, inadvertent bias that we might be developing into our systems, and the ways in which we can prevent that. And one of the ways in which we can do that is ensure that we have a level of diversity in our organizations, in our teams, in the people that are thinking about and building these solutions.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, we need not only women, but also, as you say, diversity for many reasons, for how this bias come into the products that we are using and the ones that are coming. So it was excellent to hear that from the very first, you had the very first meetup you had in this conference. It was a huge success, so a lot of interest. And yeah, I mean, even if I were in this conference, I would be interested to, just for curiosity, go and see, because this is, I feel, is very important. So what's now the vision of Women Identity now that feels has already 2 years, right? It's a bit more established. So what?
Yeah. So we are now registered as a not-for-profit organisation. We're a membership organisation. We are open to anybody. Anybody can join at all, irrespective of, kind of background or gender or anything else. It is, the way that we have made it completely inclusive is that it is also free to join. So anybody can join. All you need to do is go to www.womeninidentity.org. and you can join there. In terms of our vision is that digital identity solutions built for everyone are built by everyone. And our mission is to inspire, elevate, and support a more diverse workforce in the digital identity industry. Now, we've held lots of meetups, as I said, over the last couple of years. We are going to be holding more meetups. I mean, I was just talking to some people yesterday. I think we've got about 7 or 8 scheduled before the end of the year. We're going to be holding meetups in New Zealand, our first one, the other side of the world, later on this year, which is really exciting. We're going to have our first meetup in the Netherlands. We're going to have another one in Germany. We're going to be having one in Seattle. And next year, really excitingly, we're going to be having our first one around the ID for Africa conference, and that's going to be in Morocco in June. So we really are starting to develop these meetups, and that is where anybody can go to our meetups, meet other people in the identity industry, who are interested in diversity within our industry. We also have forums on the website. So when you go and you join up, you can then access geographical forums, also vertical sector forums. We have newsletters. So there's a real reason for people to join. We also collaborate with conference organisers. So we have lots of conference organisers who offer us discount codes for our membership. So if you join, you can get access to all of those discount codes. So if you want to go to the Gartner conference, for example, in Las Vegas in December, we have a discount code for that. Gartner have a conference next year. We're going to have a discount code for ID for Africa. So that's what our members get, and that's the value they get. So they get the network, they get the forums, they get access to, conferences. So there's a huge amount of value there. We're also going to be setting up a kind of mentorship scheme. And the other thing that we do is around grassroots development. So trying to bring new people into the industry through mentoring, but also internships as well. The way that the organisation is funded through sponsorship. So we are looking for sponsors for Women in Identity. So, I mean, again, if anybody wants to kind of contact us around sponsorship, the email address is info@womeninidentity.org. We would be really grateful for any organisations who are interested in sponsoring us. And there's different ways in which organisations can sponsor us, but obviously there's reciprocal benefit for doing that. We will help market those organisations and everything else as well. The organisation is run by volunteers. And, the board and the leadership team, it's all voluntary. So again, if anybody wants to join Women in Identity and thinks that they could give up some of their free time and help the organisation, we're also looking for volunteers as well from industry. So that's the aim, that's the mission. As I say, we're going to have more meetups over the next 12 months, and I would just encourage anybody to join.
Well, excellent. Actually, it's impressive how much you are already achieving this. Next year, you're already in Africa, as you mentioned, New Zealand very soon. And wow, it's excellent. What about for women or people from different backgrounds who are listening to this, but are saying, okay, well, it sounds like a great cause, but I'm not really interested in digital identity. I'm not sure if I should join this industry or no? What some examples or reasons you can tell us why you think that this is important, that the diversity in the industry is really important.
Yeah, I think we've kind of touched on it, but I think just having, more diverse voices and more viewpoints in this industry will be really important for the development of the products that we produce. I mean, if we look at some of the evidence around diverse teams, and McKinsey and Boston Consulting have done a huge amount of research around diversity and how that improves, products and how they're developed. And also it actually improves the bottom line and the profitability of a business. So, I think that there are really good business reasons for us to have diverse teams in the organizations. But also, I think diversity increases the possibilities and the solutions and the ideas that are considered. Now, interestingly, the evidence shows that actually slows down decision making in organizations and causes friction because you've got more diverse voices, but it actually creates, more solutions and expanded number of solutions. And I think for our industry, that is so important. It's so important that we have a wide range of potential solutions to the problems that we're facing, because humanity is incredibly diverse, and therefore we are going to need diverse solutions to solve the problems and the challenges that we have facing us as an industry. And so we need to have diverse teams and diverse thinking to do that. So I would just encourage anybody to join, whether you come from a technical background or not, whatever your background, it's a super exciting industry to join.
And for the ones who are not yet in digital identity, going to Women in Identity website and get in touch with Emma and the others is a great way to start for sure.
Yeah.
So finally, can you tell us, you have told us already a bit what is coming, anything else that is coming next from Women Identity that you haven't mentioned you would like to say?
I think the thing I would say is just go to the website, www.womeninidentity.org, and join up. Join up as a member and you will get access to, all of the events are going to be on there. We have some already on there, but we're going to be putting some on over the next couple of weeks. And just come to one of the meetups, come to one of the meetups. As I said, we're now going to start running those in, lots of geographical locations. Before the end of the year. We've got ones in, the Netherlands. We're going to have one in the UK. We're going to have one in the US. We are going to have one in New Zealand. And next year, as I said, we're going to be expanding out to places like Africa. So I think just come to a meetup near you, find out more about the organisation and see if you want to get involved, and how you want to get involved.
And I guess it's also possible if someone is not in this location you just mentioned, can start their own meetup, I guess, is contacting you?
Absolutely that. Yeah, for sure. They can, if, you're based in a country that we don't have meetups at the moment, then just let us know and we will be happy to provide you with kind of almost like the pack, the deck and the slides and all those types of things to start your own meetup. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so I would like to ask you now, just to finalize, one final question is some practical tip for anybody to protect our digital identity.
I think I'm going to go for a really, really, really simple one, which is, don't reuse passwords across websites. Don't reuse a password across different websites. I think, that's one way in which certainly people can protect their data, and also kind of different types of, services that they log into. That's my simplest one. And the reason for that is I've actually had a friend this week who's been busy texting me because she has had a password compromised. And she's just had some real challenges this week because she's worried about her data and she's worried about, perhaps more information being socially engineered. There is a really good website that people can go to. It's haveibeenpawned.com, and you can check whether your email address has been part of a data breach. And I think that would be my kind of practical advice is don't reuse your passwords across different websites, and also just keep on checking whether your email address has been part of a breach.
Yeah, many of the ones who never gone to this website have been pawned will find surprises the first time
Yeah,
they put their emails. Yeah.
I know. People just don't check, and they don't check that their email address has been part of a breach. And this friend of mine this week, she went on to Have I Been Pawned, and she was like, oh, it's been part of seven breaches, and I was like, that's probably why they've got your password. Yeah, and she actually got an email from somebody who was trying to get Bitcoin out of her, even though she didn't have any Bitcoin, and they were like, we've got your password and your password's this, and then she was like, I've been reusing it across all these websites. Yeah. So I think that would be just my really, really, kind of baseline level of, keep checking whether your email address has been part of a breach and don't reuse your passwords.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Please finally remind us how we can find Women Identity and how can we contact you. What are the best ways for that?
Sure. So number of different ways. The website, which is www.womeninidentity.org. You can also go to Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @WomenInID. We're also on Instagram as Women in ID. There is a LinkedIn group, so just search for Women in Identity on LinkedIn. We're also on LinkedIn. And if you want to email the team directly, it's info@womeninidentity.org.
Perfect. Thanks, Emma. It's been a pleasure talking with you and hearing about this excellent project, Women Identity, that we definitely are supporting a lot. So thank you and all the best.
Thanks so much, Oscar.
Thanks for listening. Let's Talk About Digital Identity is produced by UBSecure. Be sure to subscribe and visit ubsecure.com/podcast to join the conversation and access the show notes. You can also follow us on Twitter @UBSecure or find us on LinkedIn. Until next time.